they're being like, all right, great, I'm going to do away with all that, but the condom's fine, so let's just use that.
Yeah. We all know from like seventh grade biology, one sperm gets a girl pregnant. Okay. What happens the other hundreds of millions introduced to one act of intercourse? It used to be believed that if the woman wasn't fertilized, they really didn't serve any purpose, but they found it's not actually true, that inside the man's seminal fluid are dozens of biological ingredients. It immediately absorbed into the woman's circulatory system.
That's amazing.
So literally within hours of intercourse, your hormones are through her entire body, in her brain. Your DNA is embedding in her organs. After intercourse, the woman's the white blood cells will scour the surface of her cervix and bring the man's sperm proteins and DNA into her lymph nodes, where her immune system will learn to recognize the genetic type of that man's sperm. It says they'll actually develop a gradual tolerance to the antigen on that male's semen. It'll learn who this person is.
Yeah.
And what they found is, if a woman is deprived of this by means of a barrier method of contraception, and then she becomes pregnant, the woman's womb will not have been accustomed to that child. So where she does get pregnant from him after being used to that, the woman's womb will actually recognize the genetic type of baby, match it to the genetic type of sperm that absorbed into her, makes for a smoother pregnancy. They found when it's deprived of this, the woman will be more than twice as likely to suffer preeclampsia during childbirth, which is an elevated blood pressure risk. It's very dangerous to the mom. And so I'm sitting on an airplane typing from the Journal of the American Medical Association that was explaining this into a little book I was writing. And the woman on the plane leans over next to me and she's like, whew, what are you writing about? I'm like,
let me tell you.
And so I said, this is an epidemiologic study of contraception and preeclampsia. And I showed it to her, and she's like, oh, can I read that? And I explained it, and she says, this is amazing. She said, my husband and I have been married for 10 years. We've used the condom between every kid. I had preeclampsia with every pregnancy. Wow. How come no one taught this to us in marriage preparation class? And, in the article even, there's many articles on this that actually talk about seminal priming for protection for preeclampsia, meaning if you're using a condom, you're having unprotected intercourse because the man is not protecting the woman with the beneficial effects of the seminal fluid.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that the number one, STD is what? And that's not prevented from...
It's a human papillomavirus, and it can cause cervical cancer in women, and it's spread from skin-to-skin contact, anywhere from mid-thigh, mid-abdomen,
So unless you're using saran wrap,
yeah,
it's not going to be effective.
No.
So you mentioned Africa a moment ago. Some people talk about condoms in Africa, and this will, help AIDS not to spread and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Is that any truth in that?
Well, what's interesting is the British Medical Journal reported that the higher the population of Catholics in any country in Africa, the lower the rate of HIV in that country. So it said whatever the church is teaching us apparently seems to be working. Whereas when you look at countries like Botswana and South Africa, where the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have poured literally billions of dollars worth of condoms over there, it's only made the problem worse. You're putting lighter fluid on a problem. And it's like, well, why? I mean, you would think that if you're have like a prostitute with HIV and a man has intercourse with her and he uses a condom, I mean, statistically, isn't he less likely for the transmission to take place? He is on one act of intercourse. But the problem is with repeated exposures, that protection declines. Meaning if I had a 25% chance less of getting it, it's like if I flip a coin, 50% chance the first time. Okay, 50 the second, third, fourth. How many times can you flip it before it simply lands on heads? It's a behavioral problem. And if you're not treating the real issue, which is the behavior, it's just a matter of time. In fact, studies have shown in Africa that condom usage is not a determining factor on whether or not a person is going to get HIV. The number one determining factor is the number of sexual partners. So you have countries like Africa, Uganda, that once had astronomical rates of HIV, saw the greatest decline of HIV in any nation in the country because they promoted abstinence and then be faithful, or what they called zero grazing, meaning you're not moving around a lot, and then condoms last. And what they found is they had the biggest decline of HIV in all of Africa. There's a Harvard research scientist, Green, and he said, look, I'm a flaming liberal. I don't go to church. I've never voted Republican in my life, and we got this one wrong. You know, the church was right. Condoms are not the answer to the problem in Africa. And one thing that I found really interesting is if people simply abstain for sex for 6 months between sexual partners, AIDS would virtually disappear.
How?
The infectivity of the virus changes with time. Meaning, if I sleep with someone who has AIDS tonight and I contract HIV, and then 2 weeks from now, I go to a doctor, I do the blood test, and they will say I'm HIV negative. And the reason for that is the HIV test is not looking for HIV. It's looking for antibodies in your body that are fighting against HIV. So that's what it's looking for, which means if your body has not yet detected you have the virus, the viral load is extremely high in your body and you're highly infectious. But with HIV, it can take months before your body even knows that you have it. During those first several months, you are extremely infectious. You infect 1 out of every 3 partners you sleep with. Whereas after your body detects you have HIV, then your body starts fighting against it. The viral load will drop down, your antibodies go up, and the test will detect, look, you have it, your body's fighting it. But by then, the viral load is dropped, and then if you sleep with someone, then, like 6 months after having it, your odds of infecting them are 1 in 1,000, which means those who are having intercourse most frequently and are getting this and transmitting it quickly are highly infectious. Whereas if you would just abstain for 6 months between partners, the problem would resolve itself. And that's one of the reasons that Uganda saw great success, because they were using a behavioral model instead of throwing condoms at a problem. And there has not been one country ever that has turned back this epidemic primarily from condom distribution.
Wow, that's really interesting. What do you say about a married couple? Maybe the man finds out he has HIV. Can't he use a condom then, or what's the solution? And
in order to prevent him from getting HIV, abstinence could do that. It's not as if he needs a condom to not get HIV. Yeah, no, what I'm saying is if he has HIV, in order to keep his wife from getting HIV, he doesn't need to use a condom. He needs to be abstinent. But the thing is, if he's had it for 6 months, his odds of transmitting it are lower than 1 in 1,000 per active intercourse.
Oh, is that right?
You know, if he's had it a long time. So, but the church would not say that, oh, well, you have to use a condom to keep her from getting it.
But then would he be morally obligated to cease all acts of sexual intercourse for the rest of his life? Well, what if she doesn't want him to do that?
Well, that would be something they'd have to discern together. There's also medication that can be used to incredibly decrease your chances of contracting HIV. Right now, it's being used in commercials targeting men who sleep with men, saying, like, if you could be a chance of getting HIV, make sure to take this. And so there's drugs that can really knock down your chances.
What about not HIV? What about other, STDs?
Yeah.
What do you say to people like that? They're in a married relationship.
Yeah.
Is the man obligated to abstain?
Yeah.
In that sense, would you say? Or
well, it would be up to their discernment, because all of the STDs are curable except the ones that begin with the letter H. So HIV, HPV, herpes, and hepatitis. Those are the 4 that we can't cure. Now, just because you can't cure it doesn't mean it's permanent. So you could get an STD that could not have a cure, but it could go away in time. And so with all the other ones, whether it's gonorrhea or chlamydia, those have treatments. They could take a couple courses of antibiotics, knock it out, you're fine, back to normal marital intimacy. But with some of these other ones, they'd have to prayerfully discern, because if they were to say, okay, well we're going to use a condom, and then that way I'm not going to transmit it. Well, I mean, you look at the studies coming out from the NIH, and it says like the odds of risk reduction from transmission of things like herpes, it's about 50%. And so it's really simply a matter of time before these get transmitted. But there are, medications that can decrease the outbreaks and things like that. To perhaps
where can people go to see the research to this stuff? Because you've just laid out a lot of great stuff there.
Yeah.
Where can they go online to see these particular studies?
Yeah. Well, one thing, because the body of medical literature is so vast. If you go to a place like PubMed that has all of this stuff, what we've done at chastity.com, just click on birth control or click on STDs. Pick the article, pick the disease, pick the contraceptive method, and we have tons of research with literally hundreds of footnotes that you can just say, cut, paste, put that up there, and it'll link you straight to the article, the primary source document.
That's fantastic.